It's Kansas, Arizona, round two. First game was awesome. Second game could be even better. Could we actually get Darryn Peterson this time? Is Koa Peat going to play? We're going to get into all that and the impact potentially of both on this crossover edition of Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here with Leif Thulin, and you can catch us on Locked On Jayhawks and Locked On Wildcats as we're going to get you ready for the Jayhawks and the Wildcats here on today's episode. A little preview. We'll get into the Koa Peat, Darryn Peterson discussion. We'll get into the importance of this game, key matchups that could determine it, how each team comes away with the victory, and more. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla-y, cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. All right, Leif, thanks for joining on the show today. This is a pretty big one on Saturday, and it's interesting because when you look at the juxtaposition of the first time these two met, it was obviously Kansas without the key player. Darryn Peterson doesn't go. Now, Koa Peat might go in this game, but maybe he doesn't. I guess and he didn't have a great game in Allen Fieldhouse, so I think if he does play, I would expect him to play better than the first go-around. But let's just start there with the Koa Peat kind of injury. How have you seen Arizona adjust to that, and how do you think it impacts this matchup?
Well, the first iteration of this game, Koa Peat played through an injury, and I think to his detriment. I think it ended up costing him more time, which is why he's been out recently. And he was a non-factor. Like you said, he played poorly in that game. And then they played against Texas Tech, and he pulled himself out. The team said, "Yeah, you can't move at all. This is a third straight game of it. Let's sit you and get you right." So I think if he plays, he's likely to play better. I'm not sure he does play. The thing I would bring up that I think is different in this game is Arizona is now accustomed to teams doing what Kansas did and loading up, doubling the bigs, and saying, "Okay, like you guys are huge." Speaking of Arizona, Arizona's really big, and teams at that point hadn't proven that they can stay in front of Arizona near the rack, and Arizona's going to dominate the glass. Kansas held Arizona. I think it was +2 Arizona on the glass and +2 in the paint. And at that point, that was the closest Arizona had been played in either all season. And then the blueprint was out. Arizona then played against Houston, Texas Tech, two teams that are very stingy defensively, and have started to space the game out. You saw an emergence of Anthony Dell'Orso. Braden Burries is back from the flu, who he tried to play through that. And so there's just more perimeter scoring, and there's still that same rim domination. Though Koa Peat's not playing, it's a little different offensively. The blueprint is still the same. Get to the rim, shoot a lot from the rim, rebound a ton, and if you can spray the ball and hit a few threes, that's definitely helpful. Arizona is playing with some thin depth right now, and I think it makes them a little more vulnerable than they would be at home in this matchup, but that's what makes basketball fun.
It sounds like to me that Arizona has, I don't know, from that week where they did lose both of those games, it sounds like they have learned from it, I guess, which is as part of a season as any. How do you learn from your potential, I don't know, issues or mistakes? And it sounds like they're getting better from there, which obviously is a little bit scary. And, you know, when I think of potentially no Koa Peat, I think of more Karchenkov at the 4. And I think of the first matchup where Bryson Tiller went for 18 points and 8 rebounds. He was really good for Kansas. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, in theory, maybe that means a smaller player on Tiller, which could be a good thing for Tiller in the post, but also Karchenkov is probably a better defender than Koa Peat. So maybe that's bad for him. So how do you kind of see that in terms of on the defensive end of the floor having an impact for this matchup?
Well, the size is an interesting thing because Kansas is one of the few teams that has pretty much like size with Arizona. They play two bigs in Tiller and Bidunga. And Arizona, in this case, they usually have a rotation of 3 bigs with Koa Peat. If he's back, then the bigs would be Koa Peat and Krivas, and then you throw in Awaka. They've shortened the bench, and it's been Awaka and Krivas, but those two have spacing issues. And so they've started playing, like you mentioned, Karchenkov at the 4. And to answer your question defensively, Karchenkov, I think, is one of the best defenders in the entire country. And so I think he's okay giving up size to Tiller because Tiller's not necessarily a back-to-the-basket scorer. He scores on catch and shoot or lobs, and he's got good hands, good skill. So I don't think Arizona's necessarily giving up too much in terms of that matchup, but I do think rebounding is something that Kansas mitigated the advantage of. And Arizona felt the ramifications of Bidunga and Tiller's size. And Koa Peat's shot was altered, though he didn't really have his legs in that game. I thought Krivas was the best player for the first 25 minutes of that first matchup in Allen Fieldhouse, and then wore out. And Kansas's pace and just having a couple bigs that really run the floor wore Krivas out. And then Texas Tech said, we're going to double Krivas. And so I think the importance for Arizona is not turning the ball over. And turning the ball over is what led to a couple of Kansas's momentum plays. I think Arizona's learned to play out of the post as opposed to having, just this enormous balance for 8 guys that can go for 20. Now they're down to 5 or 6 that really make the biggest difference in the game. And I think the biggest part of this game will be, is Arizona healthy enough to execute the way they want to through the middle? And if they are not, how well can Braden Burries and Jaden Bradley, who played his worst game of the season at Kansas, credit to Kansas, but that's just like the playing truth on that one. I think are those guys willing to step up and put up 49 like they did against Baylor in a must-have win to put them in position to secure the Big 12.
Yeah, and I will say that the turnover thing has been not great for KU in terms of forcing them this season, especially on the road. They've been better at it at home. They've been more neutral nationally. They've been really bad at it on the road, so I wonder if that comes into play on the road a little bit more here. Now, the flip side of this is Darryn Peterson did not go in the first meeting, and I think there were certain things that, we've seen at times. KU has moved the ball a little bit better at certain times with and without Darryn Peterson. But one thing that I find interesting here is there's a little bit with the Arizona defense that I think the amount of mid-range shots that they give up is a lot. And I think that is on purpose, right? I mean, when you're looking at the style of playing bigs, dropping coverage, and basically saying, hey, we want to analytically take away the shots at the rim. We want to take away the 3-point. Like, that makes sense to me. But what I find interesting from that perspective is if you are going to live in a world of, hey, we're comfortable giving up some more of those mid-ranges, it worked out good for them in the first matchup. KU was 4 of 11 on mid-range twos. That's only 36%. KU also only shot 2 of 10 on above the break threes in the first matchup, which is Arizona gives up more above the breaks than they do corner threes, just in terms of compared to nationally average there. Kansas did not shoot well in either of those zones. And that's where I think Peterson, if he does make a big impact in this game, it would come from, because Peterson is KU's best mid-range shooter. He's shooting 47% from the mid-range on the most volume on the team. And he's taking the most above the break threes on the team and shooting them at about a 36.5% clip. So how do you see Peterson having kind of an impact on this one for better or for worse?
Yeah, there's 2 sides of the coin on this one. So Peterson, to me, is the most talented player in the country. I think he's the number 1 pick. And I'm not telling your audience anything new, but he's precocious. To my Arizona fans, he's precocious. He's fantastic. And he can score just with the best of them. The thing I'd tell you, Kansas fans, that don't necessarily know this is Arizona's held AJ DeBonsa, who is scoring 26 per game, Big 12. He's been incredibly inefficient against Arizona, and against every other team in the Big 12, he's over 50%. Against Arizona, he's shot 30%. They've played against Mo Odom, Arizona State, PJ Haggerty, all these prolific scorers, and none of them have scored well. They've scored, but they've shot a ton. And I think part of what happened in Allen Fieldhouse that helped Kansas beat Arizona was no Darryn Peterson meant a prolific pace versus Darryn Peterson. I think they play more methodically. And I don't have the exact stats on off, but I'd be very, very confident in that statistic because Kansas is ranked 200th in tempo. And they played at light speed against Arizona, and they wore down a thinning in-depth team that was battling through injury in that game. So to me, the biggest difference is if Peterson plays, the game slows down. It's played more in a half court, and Arizona likely wins the turnover battle because Kansas, like you said, doesn't force a ton of turnovers. Arizona doesn't force a ton, but they are very good in transition. And if you put this game into who can rebound better and get extra shots via possessions like turnovers leading to easy baskets or second chance points, I'd say 9 times out of 10, Arizona wins that type of game. Peterson has the talent to knock a team out of that by hitting difficult threes, but I do have faith that Arizona can limit Darryn Peterson in the sense that it takes a spectacular performance from an individual to stay with this team of Arizona. And I felt like the team of Kansas outperformed the individually really good performances of Krivas and Burries, whereas the rest of the team I thought played very poorly. And Flory Bidunga was fantastic, limiting Arizona. So my big takeaway is if the pace is slower, I actually think that helps Arizona. And if Peterson shoots it really well, of course, that brings it back. But I also think it takes away from the ancillary pieces. Like Trey White was the reason that Houston, that game went Kansas's way. He was fantastic. Trey White had a minimal impact against Arizona. I feel like if Arizona is going to see this team, they're going to say, okay, Darryn Peterson, you score 35 on tough shots, and we'll take away Trey White, Melvin Council, and Bryson Tiller. And I think Arizona is willing to live with that equation.
All right, let's get into more about this game and some more of those key matchups, player matchups between Flory and Krivas. That in itself kind of determined that first game, as you kind of alluded to. Krivas, best player on the floor first 25 minutes. Flory was probably best player on the floor the final 15 minutes. So we'll get into all that and more. This is Locked On Jayhawks and Locked On Wildcats crossover.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. South Carolina rolled past Ole Miss 85-48 to clinch a share of the SEC regular season title and lock down the number 1 seed in the conference tournament. The Gamecocks extended their win streak over Ole Miss to 21 straight. UCLA dominated Wisconsin 80-60 to secure its first outright Big Ten regular season championship in program history. The Bruins improved to 27-1 overall and remain unbeaten in conference play. And number 12 TCU stormed back from a 13-point fourth quarter deficit to beat Iowa State 80-73. The Horned Frogs now sit alone atop the Big 12 standings and are 1 win away from clinching another regular season conference crown. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Sportsbook. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel's giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. Flights, tickets, it's the whole experience. And now not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. So if you think the Thunder are going to continue rolling through and go for a back-to-back title, what about the Celtics, right? Like, they've been having a great season. Jason Tatum, is he going to come back for the playoffs? How about Joel Embiid? Could the 76ers surprise some people and finally get healthy for once in the playoffs? Pick your FanDuel future, apply your profit boost, and you could get that NBA Finals experience of a lifetime. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit booster and NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again for joining us here on the show. I just realized as well, I have this set for Central Time. So if you're looking at this, if you're watching on YouTube, I have the game time as 3 p.m. That is Central Time. That was selfish of me, obviously with our non-Central Time folks in Arizona. So Derek Johnson with Leif Thulin here, Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On Wildcats, and some key matchups in this one. You know, I feel like it just starts right there. We've talked a lot about Krivas and Bidunga. Something that I was recording my preview for the show actually earlier today that'll come out on Friday. And one of the things I was just kind of pondering in general, like, you could make a case that the 3 most valuable defenders in the country are all Big 12 centers with Krivas, Bidunga, and JoJo Tugler. And I just found that fascinating that could be the case.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I feel like I'm shouting to a void when I talk about Mo Krivas and how great he is defensively. And the only player I've seen that I think rivals his impact is actually Flory Bidunga. I think JoJo Tugler's a great defender, but more of it's on reputation this season because teams aren't necessarily running their pick and rolls with his guy. It's against Chris Sinak. And so I've been very, very fond of Flory Bidunga and his amazing defense. And I've watched Arizona every game, and I say every shot that's around the rim, they miss. Oh, like, who's near it? It's Mo Krivas. So I'm so glad you said it, because I think that the 2 best defenders in the country are in this game. I think the Big 12, if Tugler gets the award, he's a great defender. I mean, it is no slight. I think it would be a robbery to the 2 centers here. And I really think that both these teams deserve more hardware, in the sense of, I think they're the best 2 teams in the conference right now. And if you were to take the top 10 players in the conference, there's probably only one representative from each team. And that's insane to me, because if you look at a team, you got to have good players to be that good in the best conference in America. And I think we're talking about the two most underrated centers in the country.
Yeah. And so I think the big question becomes, like, is the reason Flory went off in the final portion of the first game, is that because Krivas was tired, as you were alluding to? Is that because Flory figured something out? We had seen other games this season where Bidunga struggled against teams with bigger size. Like, I think of the Tennessee game, for instance, where he I don't know, he might have missed his first like 6 or 7 shots in that one, where that was kind of the thing. And so I don't know if it was a light went off and he finally figured out how to work to his strengths a little bit more. Obviously, maybe a travel, maybe not. Wink, wink, probably helped a little bit there, but no, I don't know. I think that's kind of the big question. I think you're going to find out early in this game. I think KU's probably going to go to him early. They love to, the first play of the game, go to the big man, just in general. That's always a Bill Self thing, and kind of see how you're defending things. And I think that'll be a good test in the first 5 minutes of, like, okay, if Flory continues to play well in the first 5 minutes, maybe it's something he figured out in the matchup, versus if it doesn't happen, maybe we just look back and go, yeah, Flory's hair was just on fire for 15 minutes.
Yeah, I do think my reason for attributing a lot of Flory's dominance to fatigue was that was the first game where Koa Peat was just ailing on the court. If you guys rewatch this game, which, I'm a total nerd for this stuff and may well do, but if you guys watch highlights, even Koa Peat's hardly in the half court and in the frames while the offense starts. Like, he's trailing plays. That's a guy who's a stallion. That's just an unbelievable athlete out there that just cannot athletically perform. And I think Mo Krivas was the guy who performed very, very well in the game. Tobe Awaka played very poorly, and Krivas just took on a gargantuan task, and he wore out. And Flory is one of those guys who is just a first percentile athlete among freaks, 99th percentile athlete among freaks. And he's one of those guys who's going to rim run better than Mo Krivas rim runs. Mo may have a broader base. He may be able to impact a few more shots because he's taller, but Flory can run past him. And I think that's what happened. It's just the speed and the energy levels were on different levels. One thing I will note here in terms of the way I see this game being slightly different is that Arizona is short-staffed. Tobe Awaka rolled his ankle. Dell'Orso rolled his ankle, and he played last game, but he wasn't very good defensively. I think there's going to be more of a rotation of bigs, and Tommy Lloyd played his tight 8-man rotation against Kansas, except they only had like 6 men in that game because they had illness and then Koa Peat's injury. And now Arizona has 2 guys out in Pete, and he may come back for this one, and Aristote have been out, but they've found out ways to get them breaks with the guys 9 and 10 who are now 7 and 8. And Arizona's kind of controlled tempo more. And I think that's what I think bodes well if Peterson does play. Obviously, there's a risk. He's amazing, and he beats you with his talent. But I think the pace slows down and it favors Arizona because their bench is thinned and they're able to play more of their style. And if the game is who can get more rebounds and who can score more against the half court, I like Arizona's odds at home in that regard. So I do think Arizona has a way to win this, but I think their margin is slimmer. One against Kansas in general, but then it typically would be at home due to how many lingering issues and injuries there are. But I think that this team's coalescing and finding a way to score in different ways, whereas they only score from 5 feet in. They shoot 45% of their shots from 5 feet away. It's a great recipe to score. They get 41% of their misses. Those numbers have diminished just a little bit since that last meeting, but they've shot more threes. And that's been everyone's calling card. Like, if they don't shoot threes, they're going to lose. They would have lost against Baylor. That's the first time all season where the threes have actually hindered them. And they found a way to hit 9 threes, 9 out of 21. And if you shoot threes, you get long rebounds, you get extra chances. I think Arizona's finding ways to tinker with the recipe that's got them off to a 23-0 start, and it makes them a little more bulletproof when things aren't going as well on their A game.
All right, I want to touch on some underrated players that we think could have an impact in this one, and then how each team comes up with the victory. We'll get to that next. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. It's the biggest stretch of the college basketball season here. We got the small conference tournament starting up. Big 12 tournament will be here before you know it. NCAA tournament, but you don't want to miss some of these on-campus games at the end of the season. For instance, if you're a KU fan, you're going out to Arizona and you're like, I've been waiting for this trip. This is going to be an awesome environment to go see a game. And hey, I've never sat at a game here before. I've never been to this arena. Well, guess what? You pull up Game Time. You can see the seat view from the app, so you know what you're getting into. Same thing if you're an Arizona fan when you're traveling to Allen Fieldhouse, if that happens again next year. If you've never been there, you say, hey, where's the good seat? What does this seat view look like? You pull it up on Game Time. So you got no surprises. It's incredibly simple to use, and the Game Time guarantee means 100% legitimate tickets delivered on time. No stress, no guesswork, just a smooth experience from start to finish. It's exactly what you want during the busiest part of the season. Take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. This episode is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to 5 Hour Energy's Flavor Draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like Confetti Craze, Fruity Rainbow, or Cotton Candy. There's something different for everyone. The board is set. The flavors are ready. And I got my number one pick for the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. I love the Hawaiian Breeze. It's feel the breeze, taste the caffeine. You get that little bit of punch, but it's made with passion fruit, orange, and guava flavors. Sweet yet smooth, tangy yet tart. And again, that extra punch that you kind of need to get through the night or get through that early morning shift at work. 5 Hour Energy shots give you a boost with zero sugar. Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots. They're available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Thanks again for joining us here. Don't forget you can check out the Everydayer Club, where you can get the ad-free versions of Locked On Wildcats and Locked On Jayhawks here. And you can also join the Discord server, talk college basketball, talk Big 12, talk Locked On Wildcats, talk Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you again for joining us here on the show. So I kind of, alluded to previously the idea of underrated players in this game. And with the bench kind of thinning out a little bit for Arizona, maybe this becomes I don't know if that makes it more difficult or an easier answer to the question. Who's maybe an underrated player that you could see swinging this game?
I think the health of Anthony Dell'Orso is really important because Arizona lacked shooting for much of this season, and they weren't punished for it, except in 2 games, one against Kansas, one against Texas Tech. And it wasn't necessarily the shooting that hurt them, but the confidence that is instilled when Anthony Dell'Orso is shooting the ball well opens up more space for others. He had 22 points against both Houston, which was the biggest win of the season in the Big 12 because it swung the title race in favor of Arizona. And he also had 22 against BYU. He gutted out a game where he probably shouldn't have played against Baylor, but hit a big 3. And so that's the guy for Arizona. If he plays well, if he shoots the ball well, it's really hard for an opponent to, one, take away the rim, but also take away the sharp shooting of Dell'Orso, which opens up so much space for the drives of Bradley and Burry. So that would be the guy I've got my eyes on.
Just to throw one for Kansas, I think Jamari McDowell, he had 10 points. All of them came in the first half in that matchup. He obviously started for Darryn Peterson. Don't expect that to be the case this go around. But the crazy thing on McDowell is he's shooting 45% from 3 at home. He's shooting 16% from 3 on the road. This is obviously a road game for KU. He's coming off a good defensive game against Houston. Bill Self shouted him out in the post game, but they're going to need, he's got to hit at least 1 3 off the bench. KU doesn't get a ton of bench production. If they can give him a 3 or 2 in this one, it can't be 16% from 3. But if he does hit 2 threes, maybe that can kind of swing the game for KU on the road a little bit here. So what is the ultimate here? Arizona wins if what?
Well, Arizona wins if they win the boards and the points in the paint. That's the recipe all season long. They have 1 loss in rebounds this season. And that was actually in the game they won. So the games where they've been closer, they've been more vulnerable. So if they win the glass and extra possessions, which typically turn into second chance points, Arizona's pretty darn hard to beat. And the other, if I were to give a second one, which also has to do with possessions, is win the turnover battle. Arizona against Houston only had 5 turnovers. Against Baylor in the first half, they had 6 turnovers that turned into 13 points. Second half, just 1 turnover, 0 points for Baylor. If Arizona can keep Melvin Council and a couple of these guys that thrive on energy plays out of transition. I think their half-court defense is stout enough to stop anyone in the country. And Kansas, for as good as they are, as talented as they are, and how much respect I have for them, they're 43rd in offense. So I think if you can keep them in the half-court by virtue of winning the possession battle, Arizona is in a good spot.
For Kansas, it comes down to a couple things. I think one, they need to find a way to get on the offensive glass again. Arizona offensive rebounds is, elite as anybody in the country, and they got 18 of them against Kansas. And it was on a high, I think 40-something% of their offensive misses in the game specifically. Kansas though got, I want to say 37, 38%. They got 17 of them, which Kansas has been very hit or miss with their offensive rebounding this season. That has not been something they're consistent at, but in some of the bigger games, they've played up to their competition. They need to do and kind of match, because you can't have a game where Arizona has 12 more offensive rebounds than you. That is just a recipe for disaster. I think the other one would be, can you continue to find a way to limit interior scoring? As you've kind of talked about throughout the show, Arizona bludgeons you on the inside. They only shot 42% at the rim, within 4.5 feet of the rim in the first meeting with Kansas. Some of that is probably like maybe some shots that they normally make. Some of that is the impact of Bidunga and, playing two bigs with Tiller, who has a 7'3" wingspan, and Bidunga next to him. I think those are going to be the keys for KU is try to kind of mitigate some areas that Arizona typically does well and try to allow some of your strengths to come out to play a little bit more. So Leif, thank you, man, for the time here with the crossover episode. Where can everybody find Locked On Wildcats and all your work?
Yeah, Locked On Wildcats. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you just want college basketball talk, I talk a lot about the Big 12 and love college hoops. And so I appreciate the opportunity on here. And my Twitter is just my name. It's the L and the T are capitalized, LEIF THULIN. And the funniest part is when you type it in, it ends up popping up with an image of me. And then the name pops up again. And I'm like, wait a minute, why does my name have the same thing above and below, but for some reason the handle and the actual like @ are somehow on my own thing connected. It's like overlapped. Very, very strange. But anyway, it's me. Hop on there and chat with me. I would appreciate all the people talking college hoops, because it's the best time of the year. Just a couple days away from March.
That's right. That's right. Leif knows ball, and looking forward to this one. He's Leif. I'm Derek. That'll do it for this crossover episode. Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On Wildcats. Again, anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Check out the Everydayer Club as well. And we'll see you next time for another edition of Locked On.